You're all very welcome today, and thank you so much to Iconic Offices for inviting me, for giving me the opportunity. Thanks a million to Christina and the team for making it possible for me to bring this to you guys to help you to break all of those pesky, unhealthy tech habits that we've all formed over the last year and a half or so or more. So I'd love you to now just grab your notepad and pen. You're going to be taking loads of notes, I'm sure. And I'd love you just at this moment, just gift yourself this bit of time over this lunch break to really be present and take in as much as you can of the talk, and to start to break those unhealthy tech habits of a lifetime by closing out any unnecessary applications, anything that you have open right now that you don't need to have open for the talk, and to either silence or turn your phone off, or heaven forbid, put it out of sight. So research shows us that having the phone even in plain sight, so on your desk, even if it is on silent, it is a distraction. So just to bear that in mind the next time you're having a one-to-one, having a conversation with someone, that the phone is a distraction. So it can be getting in your way. So I'm going to ask you guys you can ask questions throughout in the chat, but we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So I won't be answering the questions during the session, but what Christina's going to do is just pull out any that she sees in the chat, and we can reserve those until the end. Also, if any of the screens that I'm moving through while we're doing an exercise, if I'm moving a little bit quickly, just feel free to take photos of the presentation as I'm moving through, if you need to take a little bit more time at the end. Now, Christina is going to share the slide deck afterwards via a PDF over email. So we're going to dive right into an exercise, and I'd love you just to indulge me for a few moments. If you're not used to doing any kind of visualization or meditation or mindfulness practice, I'd love you just to throw yourself into this exercise. You are going to wonder as I'm walking through it, how does this connect to techno stress and your technology related unhealthy habits? But bear with me, humor me for a couple of minutes, and I will connect the dots once we've completed the exercise. So in a few moments, I will be asking you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. If you already have your camera on and you'd like to switch that off, if you feel more comfortable to do that, then please do. So I'd love you to just start by sitting comfortably in your seat with your feet flat on the floor, and uncross your legs. So you can place your hands on your lap, either facing upwards or downwards, whatever is most comfortable for you. And just begin by bringing your attention into your body. So we spend so much time not listening to our bodies and not paying attention to what's going on in our bodies. We're going to gift ourselves these few minutes to do that today. So you can now close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do that. And now notice your body seated wherever you're seated, feeling the weight of your body on the chair, feeling the weight of your feet on the floor. Take 3 deep breaths. And on the third breath, as you take in that deep breath, bring in more oxygen, enlivening the body. And as you exhale, have a sense of relaxing more deeply. Notice your feet on the floor and the sensation of your feet touching the floor. Notice the weight, the pressure, and the vibration of your feet against the floor. Now notice your legs against the chair. Pressure, heaviness, or lightness. Notice your back against the chair. Now bring your attention to your stomach area. Is your stomach tense or light? Let it soften now and take in a breath. Now notice your hands. Are they tense or tight? See if you can allow them to now soften. Notice your arms. Feel any sensation in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft. Notice your neck and your throat. Let them be soft and relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and your facial muscles be soft. Now notice your whole body present and take in one more breath. Now focus on the center of your forehead, right between your eyes. Imagine a beam of light on your forehead. What color is it? Imagine this beam of light stretching up through the ceiling of where you are, up through the roof. The beam begins to carry you upwards, up through the roof. As you travel upwards, notice the beauty of the sky. As the beam continues to carry you upwards, you look down to see the view of your whole city. Now notice the whole region below. Travel upwards and upwards and upwards until you are in blue, black space, silent and dark. Notice that there is another beam of light next to the one that you're standing on. Notice what the color and quality of that beam is. Notice that this beam also stretches down to the earth below, to where you've just come from. This beam, however, is 5 years into the future. Go ahead and step on to that beam of light. This beam carries you down to the earth below. Notice the earth starting to become closer to you. Enjoy passing through the clouds as you make your way downward. As you get closer to the earth, start to notice that you're going to the home of your future self 5 years from now. What part of the world are you in? Continue traveling down the beam the whole way until it takes you to the dwelling place of your future self. It drops you right off outside. Take a look around. What is it like? What does it feel like? Notice that there's a house. Start to make your way towards the door. Your future self is coming to the door to meet you and welcome you. Take in their presence and their face. Let them invite you in. Notice what their house is like. What do they have on the walls? What's the feeling in the house? They offer you something to eat and something to drink. They bring you to one of their favorite spots in the house for a chat. They're present, they're ready to listen to you and share with you. You sit down and you ask, what has mattered to you most over the past 5 years? You ask, what has mattered most to you over the past 5 years? They may answer you in words, or with a feeling, or with a facial expression. Listen to what they have to say. You ask, what do I need to know to get from where I am to where you are? What do I need to know to get from where I am to where you are? And listen to their answer. They may answer you in words or a facial expression. You bring your visit with them to a close, knowing you can come back to them anytime. You thank them for their guidance and wisdom today. Now you make your way out of the house and you find your way back to the beam. You step onto the beam and you let it carry you again. Watch their home getting smaller and smaller beneath you, and you travel all the way up to blue-black space. Notice your old beam is still there, ready to take you back. Step onto that beam and let it bring you back to Earth. See the world getting closer. See your region. See your city. And let the beam carry you right back down to where you started. Now become aware of your body. Be aware of your whole body as best you can. Take a deep breath. Bring some movement back into your hands, into your fingers. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So I hope everyone's feeling good after that. I'd love you just to make a quick note on your notepad of anything of relevance that you want to remember from that experience. So what were the answers to the questions? What did you take in about things like how they were dressed, their presence, not only what they said, but how are they acting? How are they behaving? What was the house like? All of these things are really important things. And we're going to touch on this now in this next part of the exercise. So why did I do that? How much learning do you usually apply after one of these workshops? I'd imagine very little, and there's loads of reasons for that. So there's loads of reasons, there's loads of factors going against us in these types of workshops for so many different reasons. Some things are just simply out of our control. But as a facilitator, it's my responsibility to make sure that I apply as many learning transfer factors to this workshop as possible so that you get the most out of it. So what am I doing in this exercise? I'm helping you to really identify with what's going to drive you, what's motivating you, and your behavior. And it's the outcome, it's the why. That's what's going to drive you when you want to make any changes or you want to embed learning and apply learning. So it's what's going to allow you to really commit to the changes that you talk about you're going to do today. So when I got you to think about that person in 5 years' time, that person who has what you want to have and has achieved what you want to achieve, start to think about how they would behave day to day. So in order to make changes and to become that future self, it's not about saying, oh, I'll be more confident like them when I have this job or when I do this. And what it's about is, I always say to people, it's be, do, have. So as human beings, we're only going to find that intrinsic motivation when we start to behave as the person who has what we have. So when you start to behave as the person in 5 years' time, that's when you start to achieve what they've achieved. So how is this linked to breaking unhealthy tech habits? Well, if your mind is not set on what you want to achieve from not engaging in the unhealthy behavior, you're not going to stick to any strategy. So the things that I talk about in this workshop will be all but useless if you don't work on the mindset piece as well. So I hope that's given you some food for thought to set us off. But I'm well versed in this stuff and I'm obsessed with it because it's what I do for a living. So as Christina said, my name is Aoife Donovan Lee, and I've been helping people develop over the past 15 years. And the last 2 of those years, I've been focusing that area of expertise in my own business. So I work with leaders in organizations and leaders of organizations on their development. So my previous 13 years before running my own business were spent in-house in multinationals. So I worked in a variety of different roles in learning and development, leadership, being a leader myself, and coaching. So I'm highly qualified through my work experience and also through my qualifications. I won't harp on about the qualifications, that just people will start to glaze over. If you would like to connect on LinkedIn, you can have a read of those there. So it's Aoife Donovan Lee on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect, or my website's there as well. So what does it mean when I talk about helping leaders to level up to high performance? Well, I work with highly driven leaders, either of an organization or within an organization, who just aren't satisfied with the results that they're getting. So they're not achieving what they know they're destined to achieve. They want to be more successful, and they want to generate more revenue and to get more out of their people. So they're completely unaware, when I start to work with them, completely unaware of their development areas. They're unaware of how their team sees them. They've no idea of how their team actually sees their strengths and their development areas, or how they view them as a whole. And so I help them to identify the unobvious mistakes they're making day to day. So I also help them to identify the roadblocks that are getting in their way. If this sounds a little bit like you, then I would love to chat to you. There'll be an opportunity at the end of the session to book in for a call if you'd like an opportunity to do that, to see how we might be able to work together. And what I always say to people is, if you're someone who feels like you want to accelerate your development, you don't have the funds to invest in a lengthy diploma program or the time, then I will offer a one-to-one coaching program. And I call it a coaching and training program because I bring my training expertise of many years of leadership development practice in alongside coaching as well. So back to today's session, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about who this is for. So it's for anyone who's feeling that you're seeing or you're feeling the results of technology-induced stress. So if you're starting to feel job-related stress because of technology, if you're seeing a decrease in your productivity, if you could be heading towards burnout or teetering on the edge of burnout because of technology, if your home life is suffering because the boundaries are now blurred between tech and or between your work and home life because of tech, your job satisfaction has dipped, and there's a decrease in innovation in your role, and for leaders within businesses, you might be seeing higher turnover because of this type of stress, and all linked to technology-induced stress. So tell me in the chat if any of this sounds like you. Just give me a yes in the chat if any of this is making sense. So leaders in organizations, they do hold a weighty responsibility when it comes to issues related to tech usage. Of course, it is up to the individual to set boundaries, etc. But the cultural context will play a massive role in terms of influencing an individual as to their perceived ability to control their own usage. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes when I share my own master's research on the topic of techno stress and some of the findings that I found from an organization that I did the research with. But first, let's just dive into the term techno stress and how that might be showing up in your life or in the lives of your team members. So I'd love to hear in the chat what comes up for you when you hear the term techno stress. So for some, it might conjure up some very specific examples of you being stressed out by technology. And so tell me in the chat what comes up for you. I can just have a quick look now and see, has anyone said anything the last one? So Sophie, yes, very much so. So it's definitely hitting home. And if anyone wants to share any of their techno stress examples. High screen time, Sophie, and high stress levels. Yeah, absolutely. It's a killer seeing that screen time report at the end of the week. Rosanna says endlessly checking emails. Yeah, and being distracted from the task at hand. So Rosanna, you're probably talking about Rosanna, anyway, apologies. You're probably talking about technology multitasking when you begin one task and then say you've got your email open and you go into your notification that comes up and you've totally lost what you were doing. High screen time, but also feel guilty when leaving the screen. Yeah. Not completing tasks, Carl, due to distracting email, stress of meeting deadlines. Yeah. Rosanna, Emily May, not switching off. Yeah, absolutely. Simona, no boundaries because we're all more available anytime. Patrick, too many notifications on different devices, can't escape. Yeah, it's quite overwhelming. So we probably see the term techno stress as something quite new, but it started to emerge from the research in 1984. That's why I have the old Mac there. The Apple, not Mac, the Apple. So it came out in the research from a leader in the academic research called Craig Broad. So the term started to emerge when computers began to become an integral part of our lives. But since then, of course, the term has grown to encompass so much more. And with it, with the expansion of the academic research and the knowledge that we're gaining around techno stress, with it expands our understanding of the technology-related stressors that cause techno stress. So I'm going to talk you through those. There are 5 of those that I've highlighted on the next screen, but I'd love you just to think about which one resonates with you the most. Which one do you think you're suffering from the most? Just make a note of that or put it into the chat. Actually, I'd love to see what people are thinking. So overload is the first one. So this is what's already been mentioned, is probably what Patrick was mentioning there. We now have access to several forms of communication technology, and that allows us to receive lots of notifications and work-related requests coming from multiple sources simultaneously. And so that allows us, that makes us then feel like we don't have the resources to cope with all of these requests coming at us. So it leaves us feeling overloaded. So invasion, what that's about is also mentioned in the chat. The pervasiveness of technology leads us to feeling like the perception that we're always on, we're always connected. Uncertainty is simply about changes to technology making us feel unsettled. So having to constantly keep up to date on and familiar with new technology. Insecurity is where some of us may feel job insecurity because of technology and the introduction of new technologies. And complexity is about where technology makes us feel like our skills are inadequate. We feel a constant pressure to invest in time in learning about new technology. So I'd love to know what ones resonated with you. Sophie's saying overload, yeah. And I think from what some of you have already said, it's very much linked to overload and invasion, which is generally what I see on each of these sessions. I hope that now gives you a good understanding of the term techno-stress. I now would love to share with you a little bit about my research. And the reason that I share a bit about my research is to help you to understand the findings on how you can take the lessons from those findings and apply them back either into your organization or for you as an individual. So my interest in the topic of techno-stress began in 2019 when I was doing my master's. So I had to identify an area of research, and I am obsessed with all things leadership and leadership development. So I identified techno-stress as potentially one of those unobvious areas that leaders are unaware of how their usage is impacting those around them. So I conducted this research with a global organization, and they let me in to identify the presence of overload and invasion with a group of their call center support function workers. So they were a group of individuals working in a number of different departments across different role levels, so managers and individual contributors. So as I'm talking through the research findings, I'd love you just to make a note or put into the chat any that are relevant for you, relevant for your organization. So the top one there, management and top-down modeling behavior. So what does that mean? Well, what came out in the research was that although individual contributors, they didn't feel an overt pressure coming from management to allow technology to invade their personal lives. They did feel an inner obligation. So they felt pressure themselves to check email outside of working hours or to respond to an email within a specific time frame. So behavior as well that was modeled by management suggested that there was an expectation on the manager to be contactable and to respond to emails outside of office hours. But they didn't overtly put that onto their team members. At least their words didn't, but their behavior did. So although managers didn't state, I expect you to be available outside of working hours, they were modeling the behavior of responding to emails outside of working hours, being on their phone, seemingly being on their phone at any time. That then was passed on to the individual contributors through the culture. So there was a presence of overload. Tasks were being deprioritized because of the receipt of new tasks from a more senior member of staff. So if a more senior manager sent through a request, the person themselves found that they were dumping whatever they had on their agenda for that day and were fulfilling the request. They were prioritizing the request from senior managers. They also reported several examples of being distracted by technology during the day. And they regularly, as well as a result of technology invasion, regularly monitored their work phone outside of hours. And there was a lack of understanding of boundaries between team members as well. So, for example, there were examples of people contacting one another on WhatsApp and other social media platforms outside of working hours to get things done. But ultimately, the perception amongst participants was that a clear usage policy hadn't been defined by the organization. And this is something that I've worked with other organizations on, is defining an information and communication technology usage policy, quite a mouthful, for their organization, but not necessarily for the organization as a whole, but team by team. So that makes sense for a lot of organizations, is to set up their own team charter, what makes sense for us as a team. And then everybody's clear on what is and isn't acceptable. And so I'd ask you, does your organization have a policy, or does your team have a policy? Question for you to take away: is that something that you would consider doing? And even as an individual contributor, you do have power yourself to raise this to senior management as something that you would like to see, that would give you more control and autonomy over your tech usage. So in relation to coping strategies, all of the participants in the sample gave me examples of how they attempted to cope with techno stress. So for example, they'd have a disconnection day, or I try to not respond to email between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. But everybody also reported that they don't normally stick to it. They try to, they don't. And what I identified when I dug in a little bit more was that they didn't have a really compelling why not to do it. And that's what I've talked about at the start. When you're visualizing that person 5 years from now, how are they behaving? Are they sitting at the dinner table and looking at email and not really listening to what others are asking them or talking to them about at the dinner table? Are they going for a mindless scroll in the morning before they even get up out of bed, when they could be going exercising? So just think about who you want to be and start to model the behavior. And when you want to indulge in the bad behavior, think, is this what future self would do? So also having to think about, question for you as leaders, how might your tech usage be impacting your employees or your team members? So just a couple of things to take away from the research. I hope that's also given you some food for thought in terms of the recommendations. If you'd like to dig in a little bit more to some of the other recommendations that came out of the research, I'd absolutely love to talk to you. You can book in for one of those slots at the end of the presentation. So you can have an influence over how your org currently views and conducts themselves in terms of tech usage, but it's about starting to look at potential ways for building solutions, but also starting the conversation. So not just saying, oh, it's pointless, this is how everyone behaves, just see about how you can start to introduce the conversation into your organization. So this brings us more into focusing on you as an individual, regardless of your role in your organization. I'm going to help you to understand how a habit is formed, and then I'm going to give you a little formula for breaking your unhealthy technology habits. And this you can apply to any habit. So the model that I predominantly use for teaching people about habit formation, making and breaking habits is based on the research of James Clear. You'll see the book there. If anyone hasn't read it, I would highly recommend reading it. Let me know in the chat if you have read it. It's a great book, very popular book. We can take a look at James Clear's habit loop, which is going to help you now to understand how a habit is formed. And then we're going to use your knowledge of this pattern to break a habit. Again, remember, as I'm moving through the slides, just don't be afraid to screenshot or take photos. I'm just conscious that we're moving quite quickly through the material. So if you need to pause yourself and come back to it, just remember to take a photo. So this is the habit loop. So this 4-step pattern, it's the backbone of any habit, and your brain runs through these 4 steps in the same order each time. Cue, craving, response, and reward. So first of all, the cue. The cue trains your brain to initiate a behavior. So it's a bit of information that predicts your reward. It's something that catches your attention. So a real life tech example is your phone buzzing with a new message. And what happens to your brain when your phone buzzes with a new message? It initiates a craving. And the craving is the motivational force behind any habit. It's what you crave is the change in internal state that the act of doing the habit gives you. So in this example, you want to see the contents of that message. And then the response, that's the actual habit that you perform. So you grab the phone, you read the message. And then what the response delivers is a reward. So that reward is the end goal of any habit, and that satisfies the craving, even if it's only for a minute. It's what grabbing the phone, reading the message does. It satisfies that craving. So in summary, the cue, it triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, and that becomes then associated with the cue. So the reward becomes associated with the cue. So after years of mental programming, we automatically slip into these behaviors of thinking and acting. So for our next exercise, I'm going to ask you guys to think of your worst habit, your worst tech habit that you want to break today. And I'm going to ask you to write it out in those 4 steps. So in relation to your own habit that you want to break, what's the cue? What's the craving? So what is it that you want to get from it? What's the actual response? So what's the habit? And then what is the reward that you get as a result of performing the habit? So I'm going to bring up that example there just to remind you of the tech example that I gave you. So my one was just a simple text message one, but yours might be multitasking when you receive an email notification, when you're really trying to do something else, and you cannot help but go into the email. Or is it when you wake up in the morning, you've got your alarm clock is on your phone, and then you just go into your social media for a little bit, or your email? Or I think it was Rosanna Emily May had mentioned the constantly checking email. What is it that you get from that? So remember to take a photo if you're still doing that, but I hope that you now have a bit of an idea of how a habit is formed, and you've broken down one of your own habits into that sequence. Now I'm going to show you the 3-step model that you can use for breaking any habit, not just tech habits. So the first step is just diagnosis. So it's just about bringing your habits into your awareness and identifying your why for change, as well as rewarding yourself when you do a good job for avoiding doing the habit. So the second step then in the process is design. So it's just designing your strategy to make sure that you are doing the best that you can to eliminate those unhealthy tech habits. And the third is just about doing it, third step. So let's apply this to your own example. So firstly, you've started to bring your own habits into awareness from the start of this session, but in particular, you focused in on one habit. Becoming aware as well of how technology is making you feel when you're using it is important to note down either in your journal or a notepad when it's happening. Now, there are some great apps out there for helping you to bring your habits into your awareness. I've listed them there. So Siempo, Space App, and Rescue Time. Identifying your why. So I've already talked about the importance of why, but that is critical in breaking your unhealthy tech habits. And I like to use a root cause analysis tool called the 5 whys. So just ask yourself why 5 times, why you want to break the habit or make the habit. So for example, I want to stop social media scrolling first thing in the morning. You ask yourself why, because I want to go for a run instead. Why? Because I want to get healthy. Why do you want to get healthy? I want to live longer so I can spend time with my kids. So you're kind of getting to a more emotionally driven why than just, I want to go for a run. That's not really going to drive you. So get your emotionally driven why, and then reward yourself. Reward yourself for doing the habit or performing the habit. So for example, if it is running, replacing your social media habit with running, then make sure you're tracking that, using an app maybe to track that you're getting a mini reward, but also then give yourself a longer term reward. There's a great website for resources of different ideas for how to reward yourself called Develop Good Habits. So now we'll just get into the actual habit breaking formula. So we use the 4 laws of behavior change to make or break a habit. Now the 4 laws of behavior change are listed on the left. That's to make a habit. We're just going to focus today on the right-hand side, which is breaking a habit. So what you're doing with that 4-step is you're applying that to each of the 4 stages of the habit loop. So you make the cue invisible, you make the craving unattractive, you make the response difficult, and you make the reward unsatisfying. So I'll give you an example of a client that I work with, so you can see how this applies in action. So she was a culprit of checking the phone in the morning. So what I do with each of my clients is I give them like a daily success ritual to perform in between sessions, in between coaching sessions. And what this allows them to do is really cement their behavior change. So she wanted to embed this into a morning routine. And so she really wanted to perform a very well-structured morning routine, embed the daily success habits, but she was in the habit of doing the mindless social media scroll. So what she did was she bought an old-fashioned alarm clock because she didn't want to be using her phone as her alarm in the morning anymore. It's too tempting. So she made the cue invisible. So the cue of the alarm clock, the timing of the alarm clock, what she did was she put her phone on do not disturb the night before and put the phone into another room. So she made that invisible. She also, if she did decide to get up out of the bed, go into the other room, bring the phone back to bed, she got rid of the apps off her phone as well. So it would be very unattractive, difficult to actually go in and have to log back into the apps, and then make it unsatisfying. So if we look at her example here, she reminded herself of every time that she indulged in the unhealthy habit, it was creating distance from her future self. So it kept her further away from her development. And so if that's what you need to do, then think of picturing that future self and how much further away you are when you indulge in the unhealthy habit. So again, if you'd like to take a photo of that one, just as the example, to see how could you apply this to your own unhealthy tech habit. And then finally, it's just about implementing your strategy. So just doing it once you have the strategy in place, making it as easy for yourself as possible. Catch yourself when you are giving yourself any hassle about not doing what you said you were going to do. So just manage your negative self-talk. Just recognize that you've fallen off and you just start back again. Identify as someone who just sets off again if you fail once, and remember your why and your rewards. So that's the 3-step model to diagnose, design, and do to help you to break any unhealthy tech habits. So I'd love to know in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed you are to breaking your unhealthy tech habit. Do we have any 10s? Diana is 10. Rosanna, Emily May, 10. Sophie, great tips. Thank you. Let's say 10. Very good, Sophie. Thank you. We'll just let others come through. So we've reached the time, so I'm just gonna quickly wrap up. The essence of the message really today is that yes, the responsibility of breaking unhealthy tech habits, it does lie on the individual, but leaders hold a weighty responsibility also in terms of how they're changing the culture around tech usage and how they're performing themselves and behaving themselves in relation to tech usage. So I'd love to know in the chat, what's your number one takeaway from today? What's the one tip that you're most excited to take away and use? And while you're just popping that into chat, if anything that I've said today in relation to your development as a leader has piqued your interest, I have slots free for calls all afternoon and tomorrow morning. If you'd like to book in a 30-minute chat to understand better what's holding you back in terms of your performance, understanding those unobvious mistakes that you're making, and then to quickly close those gaps and get closer to your future self more quickly. So I offer one-to-one programs on a 3-month basis to support your development program on your way to becoming an exceptional leader.